lunch, Zach and I had an opportunity to visit with one of our supervisors who shared a story with us. And we found it so impactful. Before we get into evaluating that form, we would like for Carl Bradley to come up and share a short story with you about his experiences.
I've heard the word short, Diane, so I will be short. I'm sure that every one of you in this room can tell stories of the many students that you've taught in the past, and some very heartwarming stories. In 1970, I had a young man in my class whose name was Robert. I was teaching 6th grade at the Pine Tree Elementary School in Longview, Texas. Robert was one of those students who's first to get there in the morning and the last to leave in the afternoon, because you see his home life was deplorable. He struggled emotionally, but he was one of the sweetest and kindest kids I've ever taught in my life. He was always there. He was never absent. And on a cold February morning, on Monday, he did not show up. Tuesday, he did not show up. Wednesday, he did not show up. None of the kids had seen Robert. Thursday, during my conference period, I went to the office and said, I'm out of here. I'm going to look for my kid. I got in my car and I went to the neighborhood, no sign of life at their house. I went to the Dairy Queen right behind his house and talked to Mr. Dishman, and he said, yes, I see him 3 or 4 times a day. I feed him. And I said, well, Sammy, I'm his teacher and I need to know where he is. And he said, well, if you look right up the hill there's a Gulf station and there are 3 abandoned cars behind it, and he's living in one of them. I drove up there. It was a cold, rainy day, but I got out of my car and found him curled up in the back seat, covered with his tattered coat. I opened the door and crawled in this nasty, stinky car. And there was my little Robert, all curled up, burst into tears when he saw me. His first words were, please don't take me back. After I convinced him that he needed to come back to school with his teacher, he rode back with me, cried all the way. I went to the nurse's office, found fresh clothes, sent him to the boys' gym to shower and change. While he was gone, I called Frankie Graham, who was our Child Protective Services coordinator. She was actually at the school before he got back from the gym. We sat down in Mr. Coates' office, the principal, and we talked about Robert and his life and what he wanted to be. Frankie removed him from the environment where he was living, put him in foster care. None of us knew where he was, and we did not need to know. We only knew that we had to find a permanent place for him to stay. One of my friends was Jack Wyburn, who was the administrator of the Buckner's Boys Ranch in Burnett, Texas. And I called Jack. He didn't have a place. My comment was, you gotta make one. He did. He put a partition at the end of the hall, put a mattress out there. I took up money. We bought Robert new clothes. Teachers are so generous. We are. We're a very generous group of people. I took up over $300 in 1970 and bought him new clothes. He wanted a pair of boots and a cowboy hat. Frankie and I put him in the car and drove him to Buckner's, and I said goodbye. Didn't hear from him again until 3 years ago. I work part-time for a friend of mine who owns a funeral home in Temple, where I'm from. Robert had graduated from Burnett High School, had gone to Cisco College, and then ended up at Texas Wesleyan. He played basketball. He had also majored in criminal justice, and he worked for the Sheriff's Department in Burnett County. He found my picture on the funeral home website and wrote an email to the funeral home saying, "I'm an officer of motors and I escort funeral processions in Williamson County, and I would be glad to expand my services if you ever need me. However, in looking at your website, a picture jumped out at me, and it occurs that he was my 6th grade teacher, and he saved my life." Robert and I met for the first time in all those years at Cracker Barrel in Round Rock. He jumped off his motorcycle and ran across the parking lot, and I know everybody in that restaurant was looking out the window thinking, what did that old gray-headed man do now? After a long embrace and several tears, we had lunch. We've done that about every 6 weeks since that time. On one occasion, about a year ago, he was talking to me about being a teacher. But he said, "I don't have a certificate." Have you ever put a piece of raw meat in front of a hound dog? Robert, I have a deal for you. He is one of our graduates now, and whoever his supervisor is.
Darla, where's Darla Regner? There she is.
Georgetown, there you are. Thank you for taking care of my little boy. He's married with children, and he is so happy to be teaching in Georgetown High School.
Thank you.
One parting word. Lives of great men all remind us that we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time.
Thank you. When he told us that, I was just amazed. Zach got out his phone and looked him up to make sure he had graduated from iteach. I'm sure you all have stories like that, but that just touched our hearts today. And the impact you had then and the impact you have now is really profound.